Lest we neglect Eve, I must point out that she fails her design as well. Eve is given to Adam as his ezer kenegdo, or, as many translations have it, his helpmeet or helper. Doesn't sound like much, does it? It makes me think of a hamburger helper. But Robert Alter says this is a notoriously difficult word to translate. It means something far more powerful than just helper. It means lifesaver. The phrase is only used elsewhere of God when you need Him to come through for you desperately. There is no one like the God of Jashurun who rides in the heavens to help you. Deuteronomy 33:26. Eve is a life giver. She is Adam's ally. It is to both of them that the charter for adventure is given. It will take both of them to sustain life, and they will both need to fight together. Eve is deceived, and rather easily, as my friend Jan Myers points out. In The Allure of Hope, Jan says, Eve was convinced that God was withholding something from her. Not even the extravagance of Eden could convince her that God's heart is good. When Eve was deceived, the artistry of being a woman took a fateful dive into the barren places of control and loneliness. Now, every daughter of Eve wants to control her surrounding, her relationships, her God. No longer is she vulnerable. Now she will be grasping. No longer does she want simply to share in the adventure. Now she wants to control it. And as for her beauty, she either hides it in fear and anger, or she uses it to secure her place in the world. In our fear that no one will speak on our behalf or protect us or fight for us, we start to recreate both ourselves and our role in the story. We manipulate our surroundings so we don't feel so defenseless. Fallen Eve either becomes rigid or clingy. Put simply, Eve is no longer simply inviting. She is either hiding in busyness or demanding that Adam come through for her, usually an odd combination of both. Posers. Adam knows now that he has blown it, that something has gone wrong within him, that he is no longer what he was meant to be. Adam doesn't just make a bad decision, he gives away something essential to his nature. He is marred now, his strength is fallen, and he knows it. Then what happens? Adam hides. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Genesis 3:10. You don't need a course in psychology to understand a man. Understand that verse. Let its implications sink in, and the men around you will suddenly come into focus. We are hiding, every last one of us, well aware that we too are not what we were meant to be, desperately afraid of exposure, terrified of being seen for what we are and are not. We have run off into the bushes. We hide in our office, at the gym, behind the newspaper, and mostly behind our personality. Most of what you encounter when you meet a man is a facade, an elaborate fig leaf, a brilliant disguise. Driving back from dinner one night, a friend and I were just sort of shooting the breeze about life and marriage and work. As the conversation deepened, he began to admit some of the struggles he was having. Then he came out with this confession. The truth is, John, I feel like I'm just bluffing my way through life, and that someday soon I'll be exposed as an impostor. I was so surprised. This is a popular, successful guy who most people like the moment they meet him. He's brilliant, articulate, handsome, and athletic. He's married to a beautiful woman, has a great job, drives a new truck, and lives in a big house. There's nothing on the outside that says not a real man. But inside, it's another story. It always is. Before I ever mentioned my nightmare about being on stage with nothing to say, another friend shared with me that he too is having a recurring nightmare. It involves a murder and the FBI. Apparently, in his dream, he has killed someone and buried the body out back of his house. But the authorities are closing in, and he knows that any moment they'll discover the crime scene and he'll be caught. The dream always ends just before he's found out. He wakes in a cold sweat. Any day now, I'll be found out. Is a pretty common theme among us guys. Truth be told, most of us are faking our way through life. We pick only those battles we are sure to win, only those adventures we are sure to handle, only those beauties we are sure to rescue. Well, let me ask the guys who don't know much about cars. How do you talk to your mechanic? I know a bit about fixing cars, but not much, and when I'm around my mechanic, I feel like a weenie. So what do? I fake it. I pose. I assume a sort of casual, laid-back manner I imagine the guys use when hanging around the lunch truck, and I wait for him to speak. "Looks like it might be your fuel mixture," he says. "Yeah, I thought it might be that." "When was the last time you had your carb rebuilt?" "Oh, I don't know. It's probably been years." I'm guessing he's talking about my carburetor, and I have no idea if it's ever been rebuilt. "Well, we'd better do it now, or you're going to end up on some country road miles from nowhere, and then you'll have to do it yourself." "Yeah," I say casually, as if I don't want to be bothered having to rebuild that thing, even though I know I wouldn't have the slightest idea where to begin. All I have is a whistle, remember? I tell him to go ahead, and he sticks out his hand, a big, greasy hand, that says, "I know tools real well." And what am I supposed to do? I'm dressed in a coat and tie because I'm supposed to give a talk at some women's luncheon, but I can't say, "Gee, I'd rather not get my hands dirty," so I take his hand and pump it extra hard. Or how about you fellas who work in the corporate world? How do you act in the boardroom when the heat is on? What do you say when the big boss is riding you hard? "Jones, what the devil is going on down there in your division? You guys are 3 weeks late on that project." Do you try to pass the buck? "Actually, sir, we got the plans over to McCormick's department to bid the job weeks ago." Do you feign ignorance? "Really? I had no idea. I'll get right on it." Maybe you just weasel your way out of it. "That job's slam dunk, sir. We'll have it done this week." Years ago, I did a tour of duty in the corporate world. The head man was a pretty intimidating guy. Many heads rolled in his office. My plan was basically to try to avoid him at all costs. When I did run into him in the hallway, even in friendly conversation, I always felt about 10 years old.